Hi, I'm Meshal Malik and you're watching Indus Special. 1 in 3 women experience at least one incident of physical or sexual violence in their lifetimes. And it is also a fact that a number of barriers prevent women from reporting their experiences. This means that the figure of 1 in 3 women put out by the United Nations being abused, harassed, assaulted is most probably an underestimation. And while I say women to highlight this statistic, abusers spare no one, not children, not men, not transgender individuals. But even though abuse is this pervasive, we continue to see a lack of sensitivity towards the issue. And this lack of sensitivity, this lack of awareness training comes at a heavy cost. Let's discuss how we need to move towards dealing with this crime and violation in a more informed and in a greater empathetic manner. Joining for this conversation today is Ms. Samra Zafar, who's an award-winning international speaker and best-selling author of the book A Good Wife, Escaping the Life I Never Chose. She has been recognized among the top 100 most powerful women in Canada. She joins us from Toronto. Also joining us today is Ms. Maryam Khalid, who's a program officer media at Sahil Foundation, a foundation which works on child protection, especially against child sexual abuse. She joins us from Lahore. Thank you both for joining us and a very, very warm welcome to the show. Samra and Maryam, I want you both to be leading the conversation today precisely because of the nature. We want to inform our viewers how we can deal with these matters in a more sensitive way. But Samra, let me begin with you. I want us to begin with your experience, you shedding light on your story so we truly understand the gravity of abuse against women.
There's a level of shame and stigma and taboo associated with these topics. That's why they're often kept under the rug and under the lid. So change never starts with silence, and we have to break the silence if we are going to move forward and have a healthy dialogue. So starting off with my story, I was put into a child marriage at the age of 16, and I was in grade 11 and married off to a much older man and sent off to Canada as his wife. My education was put to a stop. I was sexually abused as a child, and that was definitely something that no one wanted to talk about. In fact, one of the reasons for my marriage was because, it was important for me to get married before any of that, whatever had happened to me, got out of the family, because it would cause so much of taboo and shame to the family honor. So when I was married off, I wasn't allowed to go to school, even though I was a very bright student, and I was oppressed and abused in many, many different ways, financially, emotionally, physically, sexually, and eventually it took me about 10 years or so to walk out of the marriage after having 2 children and working at home to establish a daycare to save money, going through my university and school through as a single mom with 2 very young children, working multiple jobs at the same time just to make ends meet. And it was very, very difficult. And sometimes I shudder to think, how much more difficult it would have been if I didn't have the support that I had here in Canada from university and from the government and the laws that supported me. Even then, it was very, very difficult because of the shame and the stigma that was associated with leaving a marriage and being a divorcee and being a single mother. So all my life's work is dedicated to raising awareness around these issues. I decided to share my story because I knew that it's not just my story. This is the story of millions and millions of women and girls around the world who continue to suffer in silence because no one wants to talk about it, no one wants to speak up. It's a source of shame. There's so much stigma associated with it, and change never starts with silence. So I've decided to start sharing my story, and then the book came out, and now the book is being adapted to a TV series. But it's a lifelong journey because we need this work more now than ever before.
Samra, first of all, thank you so much for your bravery in talking about this. And as you say, that we can never think of a solution if we remain silent about it. Congratulations on all your accomplishments, truly amazing. But something I want to pick out that's so important is how you highlighting this is representing the stories of millions and millions of other women. This isn't just your story, as you say. It's a story of many other people. And Maryam, connecting that to the work you do, when you hear her story and when you hear her say that this is not just my story, how do you take that? How does that resonate with you? How pervasive is this kind of abuse? Is this kind of a tragedy that Samra tells us about?
The issue is very prevalent in our society, not only with the women, but the children, with the minority groups, and with transgenders, or every group we see around us. So it is very important to address this issue, especially when in these times when the issue of motorway incident, case of Mavra, and all these cases are being reported every day. So it is very important to address these issues, and I guess it is the right time, and it's never too late to do it.
Right. Maryam, talking about this and talking about awareness, because this is where I want this conversation to go. When we talk about sensitivity towards this issue, the first thing is to be aware that these issues exist. How early must this awareness begin in terms of a child's life? Because we're talking about raising better sons that do not cause this kind of harm to women and girls. And we're also talking about girls knowing that it is okay to speak up. So how early should this awareness begin?
Meshal, as per the UN rights of the child, every child should be protected. So I think we should educate our children as early as possible. There is no minimum or maximum age for it. And for this, the most important thing is to encourage our children to ask questions and to give them appropriate information, age-appropriate information about body projection. It is very important when we are teaching or when we are educating them about harassment and abuse. And also what is very important while addressing this issue, or while we are educating our children, is to develop a very good and healthy relationship with them, and to listen to them, to their feelings, and to tell them that we are here for you, to listen to you and to address your issues.
Right.
So I guess there is no age to it. We can start it as early as possible.
Right. To that point of trying to begin awareness and re-education early on, when you look at your experience and now when you look at how you will approach this matter, what difference do you see in the two? Like, what would you like to highlight in between how we should approach things in a better manner in order to inform our children?
You know, I agree with everything Maryam said. I don't think it's ever too early to start. I have two daughters, and I started having these conversations with them when they were very young. And now that I'm an educator with a lot of schools and universities and other nonprofits about these topics, I always say that, you know, yes, we want to be age appropriate, but we don't. But our job here is not to protect our children. That comes later. But first of all, it's to teach them how to protect themselves, and to make a comfortable enough environment for them to come forward. The reason a lot of children do not even say, like, I was sexually abused as a child by my uncles, by a teacher, molested in the street while going to the market and stuff. And I'm sure every single woman, especially in Pakistan, can relate to it in some way, shape, or form. So when, we go out and this happens to us, we are afraid to tell our mom and our dad. Like, I was afraid to tell my mom that this happened because I would be the bad person. They would blame me that I was not doing something right, or I didn't have my dupatta on properly or something. So it is important to have that
Samra,
dialogue.
Samra, just to add on to what you're saying and try to trying to build up on that point. When you say that children are almost aware of the reaction they will get, how does that come about? Because it's important to understand children are like blank slates. They're learning as experiences come along, but they're still aware of the reaction they might get. How do you think that comes about? How are children already aware that they might get backlash from this?
So because these are, so this is just human nature, it's human biology. So whenever someone violates us, even as a child, let's say a 4-year-old, 5-year-old child, before, like, I don't want to get into too much technicalities of the brain, but there is a part of your brain, amygdala, which is your smoke detector. It automatically, like, you feel it in your body that something is going on wrong. Somebody is touching you in a way that they shouldn't be touching you. Somebody is, doing something that's bad to you. You don't really know what it is. You don't know why it's bad, but you do feel it's bad. And that's just human nature. It's human biology. Like, if somebody is violating your space, you do feel bad about it. Now, if you feel bad, you think automatically as a child that your parents will feel bad too. And because they haven't had that conversation with you, you don't know if it's okay to tell them. And usually what happens is that in the case of children especially, the molesters are usually people who are trusted and known. So it's uncles, it's fathers, it's grandfathers, it's cousins. It's people around you, around the child, that the child knows and trusts as friends of the parents, or parents themselves, or uncles and family members, right?
Right.
So now the child is like, well, no one will believe me. The child thinks that, but this person is, like, for one time, what happened to me was a family friend who molested me, groped me at a dinner party. My parents were there. They were having dinner with everybody, and I had gone into my room to get a toy, and he followed me into the room and he groped me. But I couldn't tell my parents afterwards because I was like, my parents will never believe me. They like this person. They're friends with him. And they why would they believe me? They would think I'm just making it up. And usually, if ever the child does come forward, the perpetrator is always like, oh, no, this must be a misunderstanding. How can she talk like that? And they're adults. They know how to manipulate the situation and make the child out to be a liar. Now, if the parents don't believe the children, or the children perceives that the parents will not believe them, then they're not going to come forward. So it's just the whole nature of the thing. And especially in the case of child abuse, like I said, it's known perpetrators. So these are people you trust. And oftentimes these people tell you, don't tell anyone. It's going to be really bad if you tell anyone. So they create a sense of fear in the child that if you tell someone, then you're going to get in trouble.
Right. Samra, on that point, Maryam, we're talking about parents having to be aware that their children know what's up, that their children, trusting the fact that their children know that something is wrong. Parents need to believe that. Now, your organization deals deeply with child abuse. How do you engage these issues with parents, guardians?
Okay, so we do training sessions with teachers and parents, and we always tell them to create a safe environment for children. And for them, as I said before, developing a good relationship with children is very important. A good parent-children relationship nurtures physical, emotional, and social development in the children, which is very good for them. And also believing them, encouraging them to tell their stories, share their feelings, share their experiences, their school routine, about their friends, their teacher, their classroom stories, and one important thing is to ensure the confidentiality. Giving your child the kind of space where he or she can safely share things with you, stories with you, his experiences with you, and to build trust in child, and also to give confidence to them, not letting anyone to break their boundaries, not letting anyone to disclose or talk about or to shame them about their weaknesses or insecurities in gathering. This will give them trust.
Maryam, that point that make there is so essential. And Samra, I want your thoughts on that as well. Parents encouraging children, young children, to set their boundaries, allowing them to choose what's comfortable for them, what's uncomfortable for them. How can parents do that? We talk about it, but practically when parents are down to actually helping children form those boundaries, teaching them that it's okay to say no, how can parents do that?
First thing in that, the absolute first thing is to teach children about consent. And teach children about the fact that their bodies are theirs. Their bodies are not tools, or their bodies are not fair game for others to touch. And one simple thing, even when my children were young, certainly definitely after I got divorced and I got really a lot of awareness about these topics, I will ask my children if I can give them a hug. And if my child says, no, I don't feel like having a hug, I'm not gonna push, even though it's my child, even though it's completely safe. But no, because what I want them to understand is that no one can touch them without their consent, without their permission. So you have to lead by example there. You have to tell your children, show them that, okay, their body is theirs, and they have to give permission or not. It's their choice. So it's not like any mama or uncle or something can just grab them and start kissing them. Oh, she's so cute and all. But if the child is not comfortable, she's not comfortable. There's no rationale behind it that, oh, but why? What is wrong with you? Why don't you like being kissed and hugged and whatever? It's her choice. She can choose. She doesn't have to give a reason to anybody why she is comfortable or she's not comfortable. It's her body, her choice. So first, or his body, his choice. So it's not just a gender-specific issue.
Right.
So teaching children about consent and then creating that safe dialogue space. So when my children were growing up, I made sure that I had conversations with them about period, about body issues, about all these things that are considered taboo often in our culture because, we shouldn't be talking about it. But because if we don't talk about them, we are depriving our children of the toolkit that they need in order to recognize when abuse is happening and to protect themselves and also protect others around them. Children who are aware. I'll give you a quick example. My older daughter, she's now 19, but I started having these conversations with them at a very young age. And when she was around 14, 15, she asked me one day, Mom, I think one of my friends is in an abusive relationship. I said, what do you mean? And she's like, her boyfriend, he buys her chocolates and flowers and gifts and things. But then during conversations, he just, during fights, he calls her bad words. And one day he threw something at her and she kind of belittles it. She's like, it's okay. He's so nice otherwise and all. But I don't think this is right. And the reason my daughter at the age of 14 was able to recognize that her friend was being abused was because I have those conversations with her all the time. And so I usually open the dialogue. I usually send them articles about these topics, and then we will talk about it as a family. We are constantly having this dialogue. So my children know that if they are ever in trouble or if they see anyone in trouble, they can come to me. They don't have to be afraid of me. I'm the first person that they will call, in fact. It all starts with that level of comfort, education, and awareness within the family.
Right. Samra, I want to take this now to the point in which we discuss a little bit of your experience and also society in general. When a person, an adult, we've been talking about children as of now, but when adults who seem to have agency, and people always assume that they had agency. I mean, those who want to sling mud at them or they want to undermine their experience, they always assume that that person had agency, had a choice. They could have stepped away. They could have chosen to make certain decisions. Today, when we talk about these issues, what kind of sensitivity do people need to keep in mind when they approach a survivor?
First of all, I want to ask these people the question, how does a child have agency? How does a child who is being touched, groped by a family member or by the shopkeeper at the corner or anybody, how does a child have agency? A child doesn't, and even if it's even if the child internally in the body knows that there's something off here, where is the child going to go if they feel that their parent or whoever is their guardian is not?
Samra, let me just interject here. I want to focus on adults and when they are abused in that manner. When they come out, so many women come out, but they're not believed by their peers or they're gaslighted, or so many issues happen. In that sense, I'm trying to understand where and how should society approach them in a more sensitive manner.
So basically, you hear this question all the time, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay? Right? And that is, again, putting the shame and the blame on the victim, that it was her job to leave and stay. So first of all, in the case of abuse, in domestic abuse at least, it never starts with all bad. It always starts with good, and there's a little bit of bad thrown in, and it's a cycle. I often call domestic abuse by this example, that if you put a frog in cold water and turn the heat up ever very, very slightly, the frog's body temperature will keep adjusting to the heating water, and the frog will eventually boil to death without even realizing. So that is what domestic abuse is like. It does a number on you emotionally and psychologically, and it becomes harder and harder to leave, especially when you factor in the financial dependency that a lot of women face on their abusers. Then you also factor in the fact that you have children, and if you come from a culture where this divorce and breaking up a marriage is so taboo and stigmatized, and your family is against you, and that is what happened to me. The cultural backlash I faced was the biggest of the challenges. So even though I was facing financial barriers and stuff, it was the shame that really, really brought me down. So that is a huge factor, especially for women from the South Asian culture. Now, when you then you take it to sexual assault, like rape and molestation, a lot of times these women are again molested or something by their family members. The authorities, if they go to report, they are not believed. Like a friend of mine was assaulted a few years ago, and she went to the police, and the police basically responded here in Canada that maybe the guy didn't know that you didn't want this. And and because she was dating the guy, so it is so, like, I was like, what do we need to do as women? We need to take billboards with the word no around us and flash that into abusers' faces. So it's basically this whole idea of that, oh, the woman can leave, she has agency, she can. Why did she stay if this was so bad? I stayed for 10 years trying to make it work, and when I left my marriage, people blamed me that I was making it all up. Even today, people say she's making it all up to become famous. So women are the ones who are shamed. Women are the ones who are held accountable for staying or not leaving or having agency. Whereas this is the prime example of victim blaming. That right. You are blaming the victim for
Samra, it really does show that it's not just these isolated incidents. There's a whole patriarchal structure at the back end that enables a culture in which something like this, abuse, harassment, rape culture, it's allowed to flourish.
And if my second TED Talk actually is on this topic. It's called The Culture of Honor, and I've described how, when you think of the word honor, you think of honor killings, and those are very isolated incidents that will happen once in a while, right? But or you'll hear it in the news and you'll be like, oh my God, this whole honor killing thing. But actually, honor is a whole system of patriarchy, shame, stigma, misogyny that is in the back end perpetrating these things. So the honor killings are just an extreme tip of the iceberg, whereas underneath that is all of this shaming, this attaching the whole idea of honor to a woman's body and her sexuality or her virginity or her sense of clothing or her career choices. So women who are too independent and career-minded, they're dishonorable. Women who are, divorced or they are single mothers, it's like they have a label on their head that says, fair game for sexual advances. Women who are, are strong voices, they are termed as shameless. So this whole idea of putting labels on women and prescribing this little box of honor, that this is the box you got to fit in.
Right.
And if you are out of it, cutting outside of it, you are now inviting trouble.
And it almost absolves the criminal of the crime when you just put a woman in that box, when you put a certain label on her, because then you go and say that no matter what XYZ does, no matter what the perpetrator of that violence does, it was always going to be that woman's fault because she falls under certain labels. Maryam, I'm just going to come back to you and talk to you about awareness campaigns, the type of awareness and sensitization we need when we talk about these issues, especially when we talk about media coverage, especially when we talk about how these things are discussed on social media, especially when there is a specific case that we are referring to. How do you think that should take place?
I guess gender sensitization about this issue is very important, especially for journalists. We still see stories on media every day where they are openly sharing addresses, name, complete information, pictures of the victims, and on social media, even FIRs with complete information are shared, which is very inappropriate, and they are not shared by common citizens or common people. They are shared by some renowned journalist, or and it is covered by good media houses, some of the big media houses. So I think gender sensitization is very important in this case because when it comes to children, the issue of harassment or the issue of child abuse is very important to address, because children are not believed. They lack confidence, or they don't have much knowledge about abuse. So when something like this happens, they don't even know if it's something inappropriate. So they don't share it with their parents or their teachers. Also because of the fear of abuse and the risk to the family, like the abusers often threatens children that they'll harm their parents, they'll kill them. So these kind of cases are...
Right, Maryam, as you mentioned here and as Samra mentioned here, there is a culture that provides impunity to the abuser and then puts the onus of that abuse on that abused individual, on the survivor, on the victim. And in that culture, it's important, in order to tackle it, we respect the privacy of the person who's going through it in order for there not to be greater backlash. They're already going through one ordeal. It's, of course, as you mentioned, it's important to keep sensitive information private, not to leak it for 15 minutes of fame. Those are all very, very important points. Thank you, Maryam, Khalid, for joining us from Lahore, Samra, Zafar for joining us from Toronto. We're going to go for a short break, but when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show. While we talk about how we can promote a culture of greater sensitivity towards abuse victims, abuse survivors, everyone who faces that sort of trauma, what needs to be done in order to be more aware that something like this is happening and put a stop to it. Joining us for this conversation now is Dr. Geetanjali Kumar, who's a practicing counselor, trainer, parenting coach, and motivational speaker. She joins us from New Delhi. Also joining us today is Ms. Saima Asghar Riaz, who's the CEO of Solutions to Enhance Professional Skills, a career and education guidance counselor. She joins us from Southampton. Thank you both for joining us, and a very, very warm welcome to the show. Dr. Geetanjali Kumar, I want to begin by focusing on the trauma that's left after abuse, after harassment, and how individuals need to be aware of how sensitive that topic becomes for the survivor?
The trauma, the hurt, and the pain is immense and perhaps lasts a lifetime. The incident may have happened once or twice. The incident may be of a briefer duration, but the harassment, the memories of that particular incident lingers down in the mind of the child or an adult also. And the impacts are both at the personal level. The self of the person gets disturbed, shattered, perhaps, and along with that the relationships also get affected, the physical as well as the mental health, the social health of the person. All dimensions of the personality of an individual are greatly and gravely affected. And right now when we talk about these kind of harassment, it is actually for us to look deep inside, that are we growing up as an insensitive, uncompassionate society? On the whole, we are not concerned about each other. Those little nicknames which we have in the families, calling the younger ones as chotus and motus and gandas and hippos, such nicknames are also a precursor to a bigger bullying incident. Somewhere I feel that the society on the whole, where all the stakeholders, whether it is the family, whether it is the educational institute, whether it is the media, we will all have to play a very, very positive and responsive role in inculcating, rekindling these values of sensitivity, emotional sensitivity for anybody and everybody who's been hurt or is in any kind of pain.
Right. Dr. Geetanjali Kumar, one thing I want to focus on is language. The language that is used when an incident like this happens, the terminology that is used. How important is it for us to be aware of the words we use, the diction, the way we come about and use our sentences, the tone that is behind them?
Very, very important for us to learn the real life skills. The life skill especially, which is effective communication skills. And when we talk about communication skills, it is both verbal and non-verbal. So what you are mentioning, Meshal, is the focus on both the verbal and the non-verbal. If the words are kind enough, but the tone does not correspond to the kind words, the words lose their meaning. So the casual approach and the attitude of a human mind will describe the choice of words while he or she is making a conversation, and his tonality and his non-verbal expressions to congruate. So what we are trying to reiterate through your platform is also this, that can we have some kind of emotional congruency when we are responding to a situation, so that our reactions are appropriate both emotionally, both socially, and we educate the emotional, we reciprocate the emotional sensitivity. So very, very important for children to learn and identify and express emotions rightfully. If
right.
That can begin from the very beginning. As young as they are.
Right. Dr. Geeta Kumar, you make such an important point there about reciprocating that emotional sensitivity that a person is feeling. That requires a great deal of empathy. Ms. Saima, Asghar, Riaz, when we're talking about unlearning certain things, of course, we have to talk about learning certain things in the first place. And what better way to talk about it than what happens within a classroom? Talking about creating empathy, talking about creating a sensitivity towards certain issues. How can we make that happen within classrooms, within younger children?
I think the first thing is, that's a very important point, because that's where the children are learning their, how to be, and they're learning what their identity is in terms of their personalities. So I think a lot of the times when we talk about, when we say to boys, man up, and boys don't cry, or, it's okay, she's a girl, but, you are a boy and you have to be stronger. We have to get rid of those kind of, gender biases, and we have to tell girls that they have to be strong as well, and that it is okay to be strong. So I think within the classroom also, rather than using gender biased language, gender biased activities where we tell the boys to go play outside, but we tell the girls to sort of do more, within the classroom, do more indoor activities. Those are the kind of things which we need to change as well, which affect behaviors. We need to also look out for bullying. Dr. Kumar referred to bullying, and yes, nicknames is important. Also, for teachers to recognize bullying in the playground is important. Sometimes it may be bullying by the opposite gender. Sometimes it may be bullying from the same gender. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's also
Saima,
bullying by
Asghar,
teachers.
let me just put this question to you, because I think this is something that a lot of people will be talking about. Here's harassment, here's sexual abuse, and then we're talking about bullying in the classroom. These are just children. What's the connection there?
Well, obviously, they're being groomed if they're being encouraged to be bullies, or even if they're not being encouraged actively, but if their bullying is being shrugged off as something that boys will be boys. So we are underscoring that it is okay. We are encouraging a certain mindset, and it's actually that mindset that manifests itself into becoming either abusers, or even if they're not active abusers themselves, but into somebody who dismisses abuse, or into somebody that doesn't even recognize abuse, because it seemed to be, that they feel that the other person's overreacting, or it's okay. And that lack of empathy is what accepting bullying in the classroom means, that we are growing up children, or we are raising children who are not empathetic enough. So unless we create empathy in children, and we teach them to recognize bullying, and also we teach them to how to stand up to bullying. A lot of the times we will tell children who are bullied, it could be boys and girls, we tell them it's okay, don't make an issue about it, it's all right, let's brush it under the carpet, or just let it go, or maybe you misunderstood, or maybe that they didn't mean to push you. We don't tell them to stand up.
But Ms. Asghar, I think here it's also very important for the adult in the room to recognize that this is bullying, and this isn't just, a child being naughty, or being, just wanting to have some fun, or boys will be boys, that attitude that is put to that sort of behavior. Dr. Geetanjali Kumar, this is a question that is, of course, aimed in order to understand how parents and how teachers can recognize bullying from just, fun-loving behavior.
One very simple lesson which if we can teach to our children, and if we've missed out in their childhoods, never too late to learn even in adulthood. My fun is coming at what cost? If I smile and the other person frowns, other person cannot reciprocate that smile because that person gets uncomfortable while I smile, then it is not an act of fun. It is not a simple act of fun. Funny teasing, any teasing can very, very easily turn into bullying. So teasing can never be a healthy or a positive teasing. Yes, we need to be tolerant at times, but how tolerant we will be, that will be decided by the person at an individual level. What bothers me, if I don't care a little to those nicknames, okay, but the other person gets hassled if he or she is called by a nickname. So I need to accept and respect the other person's sensitivity, other person's comfort level. So it is actually generating a sense of mutualism where my pleasure cannot be a fear factor for the other person.
Right. Such an essential point for parents who, of course, at many times think that their kids cannot do any wrong, because, of course, parents love their children. They don't want to believe that their child is in the wrong. How can they recognize that their child is becoming a bully or is bullying other children, and how can they intervene at that point?
Mishal, before I answer your question, I really want to share this, that we have upped number of research studies, upped number of interviews done by the perpetrators, the people who've indulged in such kind of incidents where they have bullied the other person, harassed a person, which turned out into a huge crime, small crime or big crime. Whenever they are interviewed, their case histories, everything tell us that perhaps they've been a victim themselves. So in a home, in a family where the child sees the mother being harassed, the mother being tortured, the mother being hit, the child it'll be very easy for the child to grow up as a person who gives back the same thing to others. So the family environment becomes very, very important. But okay, at times in certain families we may find that the family environment is very positive. The family environment doesn't have such negative examples for the child to absorb, but the child is moving out in the environment. So if as parents, first we need to come out of our denial bubbles. We cannot take our children for granted because their growth and development is being influenced by various invisible factors. So can a parent keep a track of those invisible factors? Very, very challenging. But we should always be cautioned about those invisible factors. So parental communications which are healthy and positive, where such issues are being discussed. Supposedly there is an issue which is there in the media. The family discusses about it. What is the child's take on it? What is the child's opinion? What are the kind of words the child use? This will be a small window for a parent to figure out where the child stands. Then if the parents observe the child in his social interactions, how does he play with his friends? How does he express his frustrations with his friend? When he loses, when he doesn't win, when he doesn't get a chance, how does he behave? How does he, what is his communication pattern with his friends? If the parent is interacting with the teachers on a regular basis to keep a track of his behavior at school, so constant, rigorous, vigilant monitoring, supervision.
Dr. Geetanjali, Kumar, you are making such important points here, and I want to take this to Ms. Asghar Riaz and talk to her about this. As we talk about how parents need to be aware of how their children interacts with other children, how they respond to certain news pieces, what their take is on certain things. Teachers also have a very important role because they spend such a huge amount of the day with the child. What sort of red flags do they need to look out for, and how can they go about in trying to rectify that behavior in a manner that's acceptable? Because you work on this teacher training aspect a lot.
I think the first and foremost for teachers is, again, empathy. They need to obviously watch out if a child is uncomfortable in a certain situation. They need to make sure that they're not pushing the child towards a situation. So if a child is, for example, uncomfortable going on the football field or the basketball court or whatever, they need to understand why is this child who's normally very proactive, very social, now suddenly not going out and being participatory in this particular activity. What teachers also need to watch out is, and this is something I was trying to say earlier, is not only bullying from between students, but also sometimes, unfortunately, teachers in their own endeavor to be disciplinarians also end up bullying children. And we need to, as teachers, we also need to understand that we need to develop empathy within ourselves and find ways to positively discipline children rather than authoritatively discipline them all the time. Because children have to be comfortable with teachers, and they should be comfortable with coming to them and telling them when they're uncomfortable. If teachers have such a too big a power distance between themselves and students, then if students will not feel comfortable coming to them and talking to them because they feel that their concerns will be brushed off or they will be humiliated by the teachers. Tum to aise hi hamesha kehte ho, you are always complaining, you are just doing it to get out of work, or you are lazy. So teachers also need to be careful that they don't label students. If they feel that a child is showing symbols of laziness or is not hardworking enough, they need to probe and they need to see what the problem is, because generally there is something behind that negative attribute that seems to be negative to us. It may be part of a deeper psychological or emotional problem. And teachers need to understand without labeling the children themselves, because then those children go out and label us.
Right. It seems like there's a process in which we need to understand how every little thing reproduces that culture. We need to be aware of how we need to change our own behavior, be aware of when to intervene and stop someone else's behavior from becoming violent. I'm going to end on a note and put this question to both of my guests, but I'll start with Dr. Geetanjali Kumar. Dr. Geetanjali Kumar, this will probably bring our conversation full circle, but when we talk about gender biases and promoting them, instilling them, boys should be tough, they shouldn't cry, girls, are beautiful, pretty, they shouldn't be too outspoken. All of this, how do you think it fosters this culture of abuse and harassment, so much of the problems we see today?
So definitely, as they say, charity begins at home. So the bad work also begins at home, I feel, because the home is the first and the foremost, most responsible institution in the life of a child. Home is the first school of the child. So the bond between the parents, how loving it is, how respectful it is. If the father is unable to express, unable to manage his anger on something he doesn't like at the dining table, and how does he behave? If there is something which the mother forgets to do, how does the father react to that situation? So how are the ladies at home treated by the men at home is the first impression of gender sensitivity that a child can imbibe. 1. 2. And as the child is growing, he sees these gender interactions, the discrimination, the preferences in the gender interactions within the family and outside the family in the society. Then again in the schools also, the simple task of making a list, the teacher perhaps will assign to a female child because her handwriting is good. She can sit well and she can sit and do this work. If there is a task like removing the furniture, shifting the furniture, the boys can do this task. So we have created our own biases by attaching our preferences to simple tasks like this. So the child tends to get a reformation of the message that boys are stronger and the girls are weaker. So the power dynamics, the understanding of the power dynamics which is there in the family, mother is there to cook food, the father is there to earn the money. Yes, the equations are changing, but not changing at the pace as it should be.
Right.
Our media also, sorry, I'm talking about media time and again, because media is a very, very huge and a very, very impacting medium in the life of a young child today. And especially during this pandemic time, the incidents of violence, domestic violence, have increased grossly to
Right.
gigantic numbers at homes for the women and for the children also.
Right.
Why? Because anger management is something which is not being taught. You and I cannot expect people to be saints, that they will never get angry. Anger is
But
a
how
very
you channel
normal
that
thing.
anger, how you use that anger, that's what's important. Dr. Geetanjali Kumar, if I could just add my 2 cents to this as well. I take your point there, and such a strong one. When we promote certain things within girls which lead to them becoming more obedient, good girls as we say, those stereotypes also prevent women from coming forward, talking about certain things that are taboos, talking about certain incidents of violence, because they see it ruining their image. They see that will tarnish their image. And I think that's something where we need to understand that being obedient is different than actually fighting for your rights and fighting for what's rightfully yours. Ms. Saima, Asghar, Riaz, your thoughts on all of this as we try to conclude the conversation.
I always say we always talk in terms of the victim. who's, and we always, if somebody's been abused, we talk about them as a victim and not as a survivor. And I think that's important. We need to let them know that they're survivors and they're not victims. So they can, they can talk about it, and it gives other people strength to talk about it and report incidents. Also, when we talk in terms of, when we say report cases, we always say so-and-so or a woman was raped, where we sort of, we pacifize the perpetrator. So I think it's very important that we put the onus where it is. It was not the woman who was raped. It was the man who raped a woman. So the subject of whatever, or a boy or a girl who abused or who bullied somebody else, not a boy or a girl who was bullied. So I think it's important when we talk, we actually identify who is doing the action, not who the action is being done upon, because the important person and the person to be blamed is the person who is doing the action, not the one at the receiving end. Secondly, coming back to schools, it's important, I think, that all schools have safeguarding training for teachers, for staff in the school, all associated staff within the school, for parents as well as for students, so that they all understand the difference between mild teasing, bullying, and abuse. And they know they understand what the boundaries are and when it is okay, and that it is always okay to say no, and also for students to understand at any point that no means no. Unfortunately, and as Dr. Kumar also alluded to the media, in our media, we have so often, and in books as well, we have so often sort of seen that that no actually means yes, but you need to try more. And we always tell girls, oh, he bullies you because he likes you. In the playground, little boys will say, oh, he's bullying you because he likes you. And that's actually why he's coming and he's hitting you, because he actually likes you. And so girls grow up thinking that if a boy is being macho and slightly rough with them, then perhaps it's because he likes her. Also, girls are also, unfortunately, they are trained to sort of keep saying no, and the boys are trained to keep trying and saying yes, right, because of course, the girl is always going to be modest, say no, and that's where people don't understand where the boundaries are. So we have to teach girls and boys that no means no. No does not mean yes or maybe.
Such important points that you make, Ms. Saima, Asghar, Riaz, Dr. Geetanjali, Kumar, that you've made, and there's so much still to talk about, because this is such a heavy issue. This is so pervasive, and we continue to ignore it. But as we ignore it, we see the repercussions of it. We see more and more women, children, men, transgender individuals, them all facing the burden, facing the cost, having to suffer so much because of it. So it's important that we continue to talk about this, raise these questions. But thank you so much to both of my guests for joining me. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.